All right, welcome to week 14, the final week of the regular season for the Fantasy Football League. We brought in the commissioner to give us a yearly wrap up. We still got the playoffs coming up, but hopefully we can look forward to see what's going to happen this week in 14, look back at what happened in 13 to get us here, and then maybe get some clues in on what's going to happen with most likely the number one seed. And maybe we'll get some clues as to who he's going to pick for his first round in the playoffs. We'll see. Well, let's look back at week 13. What was the biggest game from your guys' perspective for week 13?
Would it be Tom beating Wes, I think? Not necessarily because of the matchup itself, but I think Tom needed an extra win, maybe to pad his resume, and he got 100 points. So I feel like we have to be watching the bubble right now with their teams. Tom scores 100, Matthew scores 99. So I feel like that was the one I was looking at the most.
Yeah, it doesn't. There was no upsets at all, except for Tom over Wes. I would say that Krantz had a relatively good game. Libby dominated him, but I think we talked about last week, if he just keeps putting up 100 or 100 more, he's going to keep putting the pressure on Tom. Tom was able to have a pretty good week, not have his classic 60 fall apart week, but since Burrow's been back, that's kind of cleared up. But Krantz was able to stay in the mix for this weekend with that 100-point performance. So I think that was pretty huge. Another thing, I think we can give the best waiver wire pickup to Ross for Christian Watson. I think that was proved last week that it hasn't been just a fluke, and Ross has been just grabbing 20 points for the last 3 weeks from him every single week.
And the timing too, because he loses Cooper Kupp for probably the season and just doesn't even worry about it against Christian Watson. No big deal.
Well, and he only what was it? $27.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that actually I was gonna say he was drafted by Lucas for $1. If Lucas would have held on to him, he dropped him October 11th. If he would have held on to him, he could have kept him for $6.
Ironically, if Christian Watson would have held on to a certain pass against the Vikings the first week, he might have kept him too.
Yeah, I think that's true.
That pass in week 1 is an incredible what if, because man alive, he's been very impressive. But I've also seen MVS have stretches like this, so I won't believe it for a couple more weeks, but he looks really good. And I can't think of anyone else off of waiver wire, even though Ross paid 27, that was a better value than Christian Watson. Unless there's something really early on that I'm not thinking of.
I'm sure there is a better one. I can't think of it right now. It's hard to tell.
Well, you got Tua for free, so we could. It was a fleece. It was a Brittany Griner.
Oh no.
Yeah, that was in hindsight 2 of my starters for what's his name on the Patriots there,
Damian Harris,
and he got hurt too to boot, so
right away
he had a timeshare. But man, yeah, and I didn't come up with that trade. Stefan offered it to me. I looked at it for about 2 seconds and I said yep, and I clicked yes.
Oh yeah.
We should talk about too the non-factor that the Ross and Sam showdown was. The score looks closer than it actually was, but just a snooze fest. Both of the Ross and Sam showdowns have been so far.
So I had the wonderful privilege of having Sam on emergency notice come and do Sam Lesak's wedding this last weekend, filling in. So props to him for doing that, what a guy. But we were able to chit chat a little bit. He was very, very proud of himself for his team name change. He's like, Luke, did you see what I did? I'm like, no, I didn't, because I think I told him this too. I'm like, I don't think you should change your name during the year. I think that's kind of goofy. And then I pointed out that I had done that previous years, so I was no one to talk. But he was very happy with that, and then he just ended up getting killed. So I thought that was, or not killed, but got beat.
I was just talking to Tim about this. I do kind of discourage members from changing their team name in the year, but when it comes to Sam, he has my blessing to just change his name. If it's always going to be a troll job of Ross, he also changed it again this week. Did you guys see that?
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Okay, I'm not going to say it out loud because this is a PG podcast.
He had to use the zero numeral to get around the ESPN rules.
Yeah.
Zero instead of O.
What's funny too is if you just look at him in like the rankings, his name is IC London IC ... and then if you click on it, it's actually Sam's cock.
All right. Yeah, it's I will ask our commissioner this. The matchups as said are what they are.
So
currently.
What happened? Yeah, so what happened is we've been doing this a couple years now where I would think it was actually Ross's idea one year because we were trying to fix the schedule, and the last week was just let's just do 1v2, 2 or 3v4, 5v6, and then Ross kind of pointed out that actually it would make more sense to do 1v3, 2v4 because that way you can kind of punch up if you have a chance to, like, it could affect the seating better that way. But we kind of did something a little different too this year. It was 1-3, 2-4, 5-7, etc. Yeah. But then we changed the top 4 because it would have been me versus Seth and then Ross versus Lucas again. That'd be the third time each team played each other, and then we're all in the playoffs, so there's a possibility for a 4th matchup. And I cited that one year I played and beat Tom 4 times in a row, and he was so despondent after that he like almost quit the league. He was like the most depressed I've ever seen him. So I think it's good. Like I didn't want to like really I don't know, I wasn't dodging Seth or anything. I mean, I don't want to play his team again, but yeah, so that's why we did it like that.
I mean, I think there's still going to be good matchups. I think the one between you and the West is going to be pretty tight. You are favored by a little bit more, but Tua is banged up.
I play Lucas.
Sorry, Lucas. See, I can't tell by people's team names. Yeah. So if you do change them, I'm never going to remember. Yeah,
I do have some other tidbits on what happens this week if we want to get to that now.
Let's do it.
Go for it.
Okay, so for the loser, I just want to point out that Tim, you did not lose, so good on you. Like, way to go. I thought, I called your team the worst. You're not the worst. But for the loser of our league who gets his name changed, it's gonna be Drew, unless he needs a couple things to happen. He needs to win, and he needs Krantz to lose. They're not playing each other this week, and he needs to beat Drew by 65 points. So or Drew needs to beat Matthew by 65 points. It's kind of unfortunate because the team closest to him in low rankings is also the team that's like almost making the playoffs. So yeah, it's gonna be Drew. Drew loses, which is that's unfortunate too because he probably had the best team name this year. Talks like a Gettleman, and
I think we ranked it.
Yeah, as a reward, he's gonna
no more creativity for you, son. You're done. You're not allowed to make up your own stuff anymore. You're too good at it.
Yeah. Exactly.
And your team is too bad.
Yeah, that's
what happens. Bad team, good name.
For the playoffs, Tom gets in unless it doesn't matter if he wins or loses this week. He just needs to outscore Matthew by 37 points, and then he's in the playoffs. He'll be the 8th seed. And then Luke gets the most points scored which is really weird because you're 5. But don't
worry, we'll talk about it later.
You're going to be the point scored leader, which I didn't see that coming. That was Ross for the longest time. And
Josh Jacobs, baby.
The only way that won't happen, you won't get the points scored. The most points scored is if I outscore you by 39 points this year. So all those this week. So all those things are basically locks. Tom's getting in, Drew loses, and Luke gets most points scored.
Finally wasn't in the top 4 for points allowed.
Points allowed that's a bleak wasteland if you want to look
at that. That's Drew, I think.
Yeah, Drew.
So it's Drew. Drew runs away with it. But the other 3 teams at the bottom are all over 1,500. Nobody in the top 8 is close to that.
It kind of
Libby, you actually have more points allowed than I do.
Yeah, points allowed is kind of a
Like if you
good
took the
barometer.
net,
Sorry, it's a good barometer to see like what's
the
bad.
net, you would be 18. Yeah, I use it quite often to prove my teams are actually good.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so like you have a higher points allowed, but your points for are pretty good. So that's why or at least I've consistently kept you as one, is you score enough points to basically keep off the amount of points that are scored against you. Whereas like Seth is really low. So he's scored over 1,500, but has had less than 1,400 points scored against him.
Yeah.
So a lot of those wins are basically the other team just doesn't show up.
Mm-hmm.
And I know from even playing you, Libby, that like I think I scored 130 points against you and lost. So it's
that happened.
I think that's a differentiating between the rankings based on record and the rankings based on power.
Yeah. That's the way to put it.
Yeah. So Tim, don't have to have your team name given to you, but I mean, you are missing out on the opportunity of having a team name like Mr. Buttside.
It's true. I mean, look, that's what turned your season around. You got the bad name, and look at where you are. You're in the playoffs. I mean, maybe that's just the name of destiny. I don't know.
No, it's a lot of luck because I did not want Josh Jacobs, and then Josh Jacobs became the number one running back. He was not even close to being the number one running back halfway through the season. And then Devontae Adams and Jefferson are like 1-2. So I have like 3 top 3 players.
Well, I think it worked out pretty well for you too, because I think initially your roster didn't look that good because Devontae, but he's really turned it around, and those
He's
Raiders,
like 100 yards, 2 touchdowns a week, man. He's incredible.
Those Raiders, it's quite the team that you pick to attach your wagon to there, Luke, because they are just, I mean, they're doing better now, but they give up points and they have to score points. It's kind of like the Lions, honestly.
Another key factor, I've got a top 10 kicker, Daniel Carlson, baby.
Yeah, you said you're well, you don't do it anymore, but pairing your quarterback with your kicker or something like that.
I think for every week I haven't started Derek Carr and one, I could have started Derek Carr and one. So I could have kept doing it. Dak Prescott is one of the most frustrating fantasy football quarterbacks I've ever had. Yeah. I didn't realize it because I've never owned him. I'm not a huge Dak fan. And now owning him and starting him over the last couple of weeks, it's like, what? How do you throw 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, and only have 15 fantasy points? And it's because he throws for like 150 yards a game. He's like Rodgers. It's unbelievable.
Wow, yeah, I don't.
I started Mike White over him, who threw for 350 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks, had 17 fantasy points. Dak Prescott threw for 170, 3 touchdowns and a pick. You tell me which game sounds better, and had 15. So I ended up starting the correct quarterback, who also had a touchdown dropped in the end zone for him. So he had like 20 points, but like it's frustrating.
Jared Goff is available. I just want to point that out. Did you see what Kirk Cousins went for today? He just got picked up.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
No.
I was too busy picking up Desmond Ridder.
Oh, it was Wes. Wes got him.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe the hope is he's going to light up the Lions, but I think our defense is actually kind of coming together.
So before getting to the coming up matchups, which we've kind of touched on already, I'm just kind of dumping this on you because I've been thinking about it a little bit. Do you think, looking back to like the draft in week 1 and looking at the teams that kind of ended up, is there kind of like an overall strategy that you think has worked best? Like if we can just remove luck from it and who was able to get who for however much, do you see a pattern of strategy for those top teams? I think, Tim, you've mentioned that wide receivers is kind of what you look at first. But Libby, have you seen anything?
I think going back into the draft, I think everything kind of flows out of the keepers, right? Because the way I looked at it, I saw all those wide receivers who got kept, and a lot of them were for like pretty good deals, like Ross with Cooper Kupp. But like out of the top, like 14 wide receivers, 8 were taken. So, it kind of created a disparity at that position. And I think then what you kind of have to do in real time is pivot, and like say, I need to get a wide receiver who can be a top 10. And if there's, so you kind of have to look for that, like Devontae Adams, Luke, or like I got Tyreek Hill and I didn't want him, but I paid for him and I got him. I think that's kind of so you got to get some kind of deals there. And I think running back is actually more important than we might give it credit for, because you need to have, in my experience, you need to have three running backs that you can justifiably start on your roster, at least three, because you have the two spots and then they'll have a bye. So you need to have, during the season, you need to get, and like maybe through waivers, find a running back who you're comfortable starting, I think. And then I don't know about tight end, is just like, Kelsey keeps Wes's team afloat, but that's about it. And
but like, so the top three teams, here's their starting tight ends currently: Foster Moreau, Tyler Higbee, Pat Fryermuth. I paid $8 for Pat Fryermuth and had to cut him because of roster reasons early on in the year.
Mm-hmm.
And like, he's I think he's top 5 now, or top 8 at least.
Yeah.
But like, he doesn't do anything.
I mean, I had Goddard and he was a big part of my success, but then he got hurt. So I got Foster Monroe. It's like, tight ends can be so replaceable.
So Wes has Kelsey, but he's 6th. Yeah. So, I mean, and I'm looking at everyone else's that's above him. Like, I'm starting Noah Fant. I just picked him up for no money. I'm just streaming tight ends now. David Njoku's there. Like, there's tight end, I think you can kind of punt. I would push back a little bit on your 3 at least starting caliber running backs. I would say you need like 1 star.
Yeah, that's
and then 2 guys whose floor is like 7 points.
Yeah, that's
like kind of really pushing. And obviously, this is my team essentially. So I apologize for making it all about my team, but I think I came into the year with this strategy, and it just played out that it worked. So I'm just going to keep going with it.
Mm-hmm.
I got lucky with the star because all indications at the start of the year, he should not have been the number 1 running back. But irregardless of that, I think if you get that one guy that like is 15 to 20 pretty consistently every week, and then you get 2 guys that like the worst that's going to happen is they get 5 points.
Yeah.
Then you can flex a wide receiver always in that situation and never feel too bad about it, because if the worst thing comes or a bye happens, you're putting in that 3rd running back in that flex.
Yeah. I will say with that position too, I think next year I'm going to push to change that 3rd wide receiver. That's like, technically right now it's a wide receiver tight end. I'm going to change that, I think, to wide receiver running back, because why not? That way you can encourage people buying more on running backs. Also, I think for the top teams, besides you, Luke, if you're just looking at the top 4, look at their quarterbacks. Tua, Ross has Mahomes, Seth has Herbert, and then Lucas has Hurts. Yeah. Like, that's probably the reason why.
If you have a top 4 quarterback, fantasy football quarterback, you're going to probably be
it's
right there.
It's important. And then you can also, the problem is it's so important, but you also don't want to spend too much money on it, because you can replace them easily enough. But if you have one of those like awesome quarterbacks, your ceiling just gets higher, like look at Ross. He's always going to have high ceiling because of Mahomes. Like Herbert, but Hurts, I mean, Lucas traded for him, and that's the reason why Lucas is in the playoffs, or like a top seed, almost, tied for
Lucas's team, you could just be like, this team is terrible, but he has Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown.
Yep, exactly.
And it's like, that's almost 50 points a game right there. So you're just like, okay, well,
especially lately.
Yeah. So, I mean, his team is pretty solid. Jonathan Taylor was hurt, but he's back now and playing well. So he does have good players besides those 2, but being able to start with 2 players who are like 50 points, that's very nice. And it's kind of, you were fortunate with Waddle being as good of a second wide receiver. But I think grouping wide receivers in a very offensively prolific situation is always good. And you were the kind of the poster boy for besides me with the Raiders, but get everybody on the same team on a good offense.
Yeah.
And that's been really beneficial for you.
Let me ask you guys this question. Do you think that doing these videos helps you, like gives you an edge in fantasy?
I do.
Well, you do, Luke?
No.
Yeah.
I think that, like, in my experience of writing these newsletters, it's like it just forces you to look at things a little bit harder, like not just on your team, but kind of I think what it helped me with was the draft from this year, because I was looking at these players and I'm like, man, that's a really nice player for this guy, and then kind of gave me an idea like maybe I could draft him. So I think it kind of gave me an edge, but I don't know. It's hard to I've forgotten so much stuff that it's really hard to kind of keep that in your brain, you know.
There's something to be said about looking at other people's teams and the league as a whole every week to help you see where people are at. But I mean, it all comes down to luck. I've got 3 people on my bench who are on IR who should be in my lineup giving me points.
Yeah.
I'm probably in the, I don't know, 1% of the 1% of the 1% in fantasy content that I listen to and read and then literally talk about basically on a weekly basis. But what doing these for, and just looking at a specific league and who's only available to me, I think the broad talking about it has helped me more than like last year, where I was just doing it myself over and over. So for like going into the draft, I'm like, I really only want these guys, and I'm willing to pay whatever for these guys, and then I'll just fill the roster from there. Whereas I think years prior, I'm like, well, I overreacted to how much I paid for the first guy I went and got, and then tried to kind of screw everything around from there. And so I think being able to see the broad perspective and how other people are doing things, because I actually look at their teams instead of looking only at my team, is helpful.
Sure.
So going into this weekend, am I playing Sam? Is that correct?
Yes, you are. You changed the team name, but that's who you're playing.
Okay. So we've got me versus Sam. We got Libby, you are playing Wes.
Lucas.
Lucas.
Yeah, sorry. Lucas, yeah.
Ross is playing Seth.
Yep.
Wes is playing Tom. Stefan is playing Krantz. And Drew is playing
Tim.
Yep.
So we've got by projected totals, the closest game, Tom and Wes is within 6 points. Ross and Seth is within 3 points currently. And those are the closest ones going forward. Do you feel pretty confident with your week, Libby, going in?
Yeah, doesn't really matter to me.
You'll still be first here regardless.
It's not that necessarily, like, I can lose, and I think there's a scenario where I can be bumped down to 2, I think, but I think I'd have to really lay a deuce, and Seth would really have to, if it was
put up
Seth,
a ton of points.
Yeah, it's kind of like a log jam at the top there with the rankings, because I'm in first, and then you have Ross, Lucas, and Seth, and they're all, like, Ross has the edge in points scored, so that's why he's 2. So I think a really interesting one will be Seth versus Ross, to see what happens there, because that will probably determine the 2 seed. I mean, I can lose to Lucas too, but because if Seth wins, he's the 2 seed. If Ross wins, he's the 2 seed, basically.
Yeah, one of those has to win.
Yep.
How about Seth getting the in real life football trade that just boosts the value of one of your players? Christian McCaffrey going from the Panthers to the Niners has been huge.
Yeah, that was a really nice bounce for him. And And well, and what also would have happened was it deflated Ross with his backup. What's that running back's name? Who's now in Miami?
Jeff Wilson.
Oh,
Wilson,
Jeff
yeah.
Wilson.
So that, but then Wilson got traded, and then went to the Dolphins, and now he's doing really good too. So it like was a positive for both Ross and Seth.
Yeah. Yeah, not a lot of those
I mean, if we're
internal
talking
trades.
if
Can
we
you
wanna
imagine how
pause-
good Trey Lance would have been, Libby?
If we want to pause and talk quick about a steal, just in general, Seth
Mhm.
drafted Jamal Williams for $1, and he's currently ranked as the number 10
Yeah,
running back. I feel like that's a pretty big key
Libby-
to his team.
Libby, can you explain what it's like to be a Jamal Williams fan? Because you and I know
he's awesome for one
He's-
thing.
he's the best.
And then when the Lions get down to the red zone, you just know what's gonna happen. Like if it's like we're on the 5, it's gonna be like he's gonna get the touchdown. Like he has the most, I believe he still has the most touchdowns for a running back. And like Seth didn't even start him like until like midway through the season. I am so pissed that I didn't think about
Just
trying
grabbing
to
him.
get him. I thought I thought Swift was gonna have a huge year. I really wanted Swift, but it's like he gets hurt and Jamal doesn't. He's just solid and awesome.
Yeah, he's the best. Great interview.
Oh yeah,
Really just
Just the
sweet
best.
guy.
just the man.
I've never seen him get tackled backwards. Even if he loses yards, he always falls forward at the end.
That's true.
He's just a beast. Wanted to stay in Green Bay. Didn't have enough money to keep him. We drafted AJ Dillon,
Yeah,
who had his first good game, and I actually started him.
there you
And,
go.
AJ just doing his thing. Do we want to get to our top 8? Tim, have you even looked at it?
Oh yeah, actually, I'm good with it. You made it, so I'm gonna let you deliver it because I
right,
agree with
so-
it. Let's go.
Here's what we do. Because Tim and I know what it is and are looking at it, and Libby doesn't, I'll just have Libby, you can just react to each of these as we go down.
Okay.
All right, so in the 8th spot, we really only have 2 people we could have picked from, either Krantz or Tom. Just with the numbers, we decided to give it to Tom.
That's the right call. I like Tom's team moving forward. I know he's like barely making the playoffs, but Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, I don't
Are
think
back.
I'm going to pick Tom like as my matchup.
Yeah, I would. Well, we'll see as we keep going down. So number 7, we've got Sam.
Yep.
Looking at his team, it's just really hard. It's really hard to figure out because of the quarterback situation. Like,
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I misspoke. Jared Goff is not available. He's on Sam's roster and he's starting this weekend.
Yeah,
Sorry. about
because Fields has a bye.
that. Yep.
But going back to what you said about Tom's team, if you took Fields off, I would want to play Sam if I were you personally. But then
Mhm.
Fields just throws in this, like, is he gonna have a 50-point game?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not as high on him as other people are. I think he is relevant fantasy wise, but I don't think he can throw. Like he can run.
You have to be able to separate the two because
Yeah.
he's just a fantasy football,
Oh yeah,
just perfect player.
dynamo.
um, Unfortunately, what's his name in Philadelphia is the better
Hurts.
version of him.
Yeah, that's true.
Number 6, we've got Wes.
So if I may interject here, I've been corresponding with Wes because I was trying to get him on this week, but it didn't work out. But he'd like to relay, and it's good that Libby's here. He'd like to relay to you, Libby, that if you pick him with his number 1 seed status, it will be the worst decision that you ever made. Do you have a reaction to that?
Honestly, I was leaning towards picking him. Now I might have to think about it. I'll have to look at what Travis Kelsey's up against. I know.
Or Kirk Cousins?
I did pick up the Kansas City defense because they're playing Denver this week, and then they're playing in the first week. They're playing Houston. You know who just played Houston last week? Cleveland, who I
Cleveland.
picked up. Do you know how many points they scored for fantasy? 31.
Defense is dumb. Defense.
How
is
does
dumb.
that happen? I was like, holy cow! Like I don't. Whew.
If you said something mean to me, Libby, during the course of us talking the last 20 minutes or so, I was going to bring that up and just berate you with you didn't deserve to win. But I didn't. I was being nice.
I mean, I still won comfortably. Even if I would have got 0 out of that, I would have won by 30.
Fantasy football defenses and special teams are stupid,
Yeah.
and all they do is wreck stuff. It is the die roll that occurs after real life plays out.
That's true. I mean, yeah, I got nothing to say.
Yeah, it's just funny whenever, especially when the top person in the league gets 30 points from their defense just to beat a team even further into the ground.
What are you gonna do?
What are you gonna do? Number 5, we've got Lucas coming in at 5.
Oh, okay, sure. I could see that.
Number 4, we've got Seth. Like Seth's team a lot. Number 3, Ross.
Luke just putting himself up there.
I'm number 2. I have the most points in the league,
All right.
and I have a higher points allowed than any of the other teams that I jumped over.
The title of this episode is Mr. Buttside is number 2.
I have 3 top 5 players in fantasy on my team. Nobody respects me because I have a crap quarterback, and so when you're looking at the top of my roster, you're like, he starts Dak Prescott. How is he good?
Yeah, Mr. Buttside
Just watch out.
Mr. Buttside really turned it around, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Paddling other people's butts, not getting my butt paddled.
Oh yeah, good times.
But yeah, that's how it shapes up. Ross, me, Libby,
yeah,
those are
Libby's
the
at the
top
top.
3.
Yeah.
Do I get to pick if I have no way to end up second,
No,
but
who? If Ross and Seth
who is the
weren't
other
playing each
pick?
other.
So it's the possibility for. So first I get to pick, and then it will either be Seth or Ross. I suppose Lucas could be Lucas, but he would need to. I think he would need Ross to lose. Yeah, yeah, because points scored, it's Luke, me, Ross, Seth, Lucas. So Lucas is bottom, and he's by 30 points to Seth. So for him to get the 2 seed, a lot would have to happen. But yeah. And on that picking teams thing, I know we're kind of running out of time here. I don't know. I don't like it. This is the first time I've ever had to pick, and it didn't work out last year. Both 1 and the 2 seed lost. I really feel like I can only make the wrong decision. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe we might want to look at that in later years as maybe a different kind of way to give a 1 and a 2 seed a boost besides picking your team. Because yeah, I don't like any of these teams to pick. I don't want to pick Tom. I definitely don't want to pick Sam just because it's Sam. And then I'm not picking any of the top 4 or 5. So it's like that's kind of why I'm leaning West. But we'll see what happens.
Libby, you're George Washington, baby. You set the precedent. If you
Yeah.
want to take 8 and be like, I'm taking 8 because that's the way that it rolled out, you can set precedent going forward.
We'll see.
Should I start another meeting to record, or are we good?
I got nothing to say. Usually this last 5 minutes is just me rambling
Yep.
about a TV show.
All right.
Yep. Libby had a good year this year. I'm happy. We'll see what happens in the playoffs.
I'm ready for it. Playoffs are going to be sick.
Mm-hmm.
Football.
Football.
Ball.
Thanks, Libby, for joining.
Yes. See you guys.
It's done.